Hey guys, so today we are going to answer a subscriber question, and the question in question is, Frederick, can you give a practical example of when it's useful to know more than one language or know additional languages? So let's get into it. Now this is let's give you a bit of context on this one, because the question, it was kind of an elaborate description of exactly how this person was thinking about this question. And basically it boils down to asking that fundamental question: when do you actually need to convert an existing application into a service-oriented architecture, or in this case, I'm assuming it's once again a fairly junior profile who asked this question, because for some reason everybody thinks that the only alternative to a monolith is a microservices architecture, and that's how poisoned the internet is with this concept of microservices. It's not a bad, but there's nothing wrong with microservices, guys, but there's more out there, and the real world works a bit differently than everything is either microservices or a monolith. But that's another topic. But that's in essence the question. So when do you actually make that switch and you actually introduce another language into your stack? Now, the way that I answer this was it was kind of in line with this. So the first assumption and the first lie, in many ways, the internet will tell you, is that people do this without thought. They do not. That's if you are introducing a second language into your tech stack, there is a whole world of problems that come with that, because all of a sudden now you need to maintain two code bases in essence, or at the very least you're going to have two sections of the code that has different languages. Now, for some cases, like say with JavaScript, that's fairly normal and that's not so much of a big deal. But if you're doing it for the server side, now that's a bit of a problem. And it's a very tricky thing to have. I've been working in code bases where we had PHP and Perl, for example, doing pretty much different things of the same, they were both used for the same use case. Now the problem that comes with this is not only from a maintenance perspective, but it also comes from sharing models and sharing data structures between these two code bases. And as you can imagine, this is a bit of a it's a tricky thing. It's not something, trust me, nobody does this just because. So that's the first thing that needs to be said. The second thing that needs to be said is that even if you have the need to make this sort of split, where you see that you're in the situation where you need to split things out into services, the first thought most people have in the industry, like the real professionals, they're not going to sit and do the thing that everybody gets hyped about Go for, which is, we use Go because it's just that more performant, because of the issues that come with having multiple sets of code or multiple languages within the same code base. The first thing should always be to investigate whether or not it's feasible to actually just keep yourself on the same language. It's actually much more normal that you split out a service while still maintaining, keeping the same language. But if we assume, for the sake of argument, that we've already thought about that, we've thought about that, refactoring or trying, because that's also something that should be considered. If it's a performance issue, why is the first thought to just change language to solve that problem? It's very unlikely that the code that is causing the issue is so absolutely performant and so perfectly flawlessly created that it can't be improved on. That's the first thing you should do, because that's the lowest effort that you can do. Remember, there is a big downside to having multiple languages in the same code base. So finally, let's just take it for the sake of argument. We've done all this. We've done our homework. We've checked all possible ways of trying to solve this. So we have finally decided that in order for this to work, we should actually migrate. Now, there's only 2 times I've ever seen this be done, and for a good reason. The first one was when we had a system, a fairly complicated system, built all in PHP, And we realized that from a business point of view, we wanted to move more towards Java. Not because Java was more performant necessarily, but because it was a typed language. It was a lot easier to find consultants and people who could maintain that code base than it was to find people who knew PHP. It was a business decision, and that's something you should take away from this. It's absolutely relevant. And that is that when people make these migrations into a new language, it's not just because of the performance aspect. But that is one concrete example. You have a loosely typed language, you're scaling up your system to corporate enterprise levels, and you realize that we're going to benefit from actually because we're already splitting. We might as well split and make a migration into a language that is going to be even better for us long term, because you don't rewrite the whole system most likely in one go, especially not at a really large scale. They're doing similar things here at the really large companies in my hometown, where the process of migration is going to take years, but they start somewhere and they split out a service that takes care of because that's usually how it goes. You have some piece of code that you need to optimize somehow. You realize that you can split this into a service. You can also it's very common to split based on domain areas so that different teams can work autonomously from each other. So you have one team taking care of one side of the business or one service and so forth and so forth. And that's actually the natural way of having microservices. Usually it goes that you first start with a monolith and then you split into a slightly smaller monoliths or smaller services. And in my world, the only time you go all the way to microservices is then when you have so many people that needs to be able to contribute to the system that you naturally arrive at the point where you have microservices. That's a very natural progression. But anywho, that's the first thing. From loosely typed to strictly typed, that's a very good trade-off to make if you're already migrating, breaking things out into services. And the other one is, once again, the performance aspect. So if you are running a system where you have some feature that has a lot of latency issues, say people like it's timing out, or you have some issue like that, you've tried to optimize it there, and you see that even when you, to the best of your abilities, optimize this code, you cannot make it run any faster, then the most logical thing would be to split it out into a service first, optimize that code and see if you can make that run as quickly as you need it. And even still, if that's not possible, you rewrite that service in a new language. That is exactly the way that Uber did it with Go and Node. So there are use cases. So what I want you to take away from this is, number one, don't underestimate how big of a deal it is to have multiple languages in the same code base. So really think about it. And if you actually do have to do it, start by moving everything out into a service first, check that, and then do switch language. Have a great day.